So as a last part, we'll see how to export artwork from a different software to be then used maybe in a PowerPoint presentation. So for our example, I'm going to use the system map visualization that we used previously here. I just eliminated the information that was around it, so I might annotate it in a different program. So if you only want to sort of build a visualization in a graphic design based program, then you don't have to build also the presentation. So this is also to show that you can then maybe even buy from a designer the visualization of a system and then implement that file to your own presentation. So this is in many levels showing that you don't have to be the whole product processing pipeline, but maybe even sort of get elements from different people and then compile the presentation. But this example is just so that we have something here to be used. And I'll even show that, like, if I would be making a sort of visualization that was focused to be used in a PowerPoint presentation, then it would be nice to use the sort of same page structure already, the sort of HD resolution document and the sort of screen RGB color format. So I'll just copy paste the work here and you can see how much smaller the A4 paper visualization was by measurement. So I'll also now scale up our work. So this page size here in Illustrator now roughly, or sort of on the same wide format that you can use as a presentation material in PowerPoint. So you can use the 16:9 format, but also I'm only gonna export the artwork and I'm not gonna take the page in any sort of account here. So if we have made the design in any sort of, you can use different programs. So this doesn't apply only to Illustrator, but we can limit a bit about how many new programs we bring into the examples. But you can make in Inkscape or Affinity Designer or any almost sort of vector drawing programs that you have available. But once you want to export files then to be used in a completely different software, the copy pasting of things and dragging and dropping them is one way of getting the things done. It might work, but you might also end up in a sea of troubles when the different elements don't just copy paste nicely. So we get to also export the artwork to be used in screens. So this screen is always the digital based sort of environment. So this is the completely different from the print and physical product. So we don't save the artwork, but there's an export function on almost any of the programs that can create visual elements. So the Illustrator's export for screen function is more built on social media and digital marketing size, because then you get to export the assets as sort of twice the resolution for the retina displays, and there's all sorts of extra things. So more simple way to export these files than to be used is to use just the export and as. So then we can convert the artwork to be sort of many different sort of ways of handling it. And I'm going to show you two ways of exporting the design to be used. And one would be that we then make a digital image out of the artwork. And this is our first example. So if I export the file, and we'll make a new folder for these ones. So let's make the PowerPoint folder. And here I can choose different options, like how I want to share the graphics. And because the vector drawings have really clear lines and they have many sort of compact sort of color areas, the PNG file is most suitable for exporting this sort of graphical content. And if you have like photos that has millions of different shades and almost all of the pixels have different colors, then the JPEG is one of the best formats. But for exporting this sort of graphic logos, graphs, any sort of visualizations, the PNG is a really nice image format. So if we name this as the graph as an image, so this is now that we're gonna make a digital image out of the vector graph. So we'll convert the vector graphics to be as pixels. And if I would tick the use artboard option here, then the page size would be also included in the image. But if I don't choose the use artboards, I'm gonna only export the sort of design that I have on the page. So it'll eliminate the page and only make the image on the size of what's the design on the page. So if I exported it, then same as with the PDF, now we get this sort of PNG option that if I want to export the artwork, I can now sort of set like how much of this resolution I need for the image. And again, here are a few of the examples, even like 4 points per inch is possible if I'm really exporting a huge to be printed in a shopping center mall that is like 50 meters width. But the Office programs, I've found that they work best if you use the medium. So you get a bit more sort of content on the image, so you can even scale them up a bit before losing the focus on the smaller sections. But this is always dependent on the sort of that we will have to sort of make the pixel version out of this whole sort of design. And this anti-aliasing, it's a function that tries to keep everything sort of smooth on the screen. And here is an option that is really best suited for this visualization that has text in them, is that it's type optimized. Inside the typefaces, there is this sort of function that so that the letter forms will look more crisp. They have this sort of hinted information for the pixel-based drawing of the fonts. But if it would be more of a visual drawing and there won't be any text, then this sort of art optimized is better. And then you get, if you have many colors and you have a sort of complex thin lines, so this is best suited for this sort of visualization that has much text in them, to use the type optimized sort of scaling. These are quite sort of, you might even have a hard time seeing on the screen, but it's always best to optimize your work to the environment you work in. So now that we have text, we're going to use the type as our main focus. And once I click the OK, it'll save the artwork. And then if I switch the presentation software and I insert the picture, I can then navigate to my desktop and to the PowerPoint folder. And here I have the graph as an image, PNG image, and if I insert it to the page, it's looking quite nice and crispy. And I can even choose the option that this would be now visualized on the page, and I can then sort of scale the range so that it would be nicely. I'll eliminate few of the elements from the page so you don't get this extra clutter on the screen. So this is to show the visualization in the sort of environment, but then we might end up like if we want to zoom in, now that I made the 150 dpi, now I have, oh no, I'm breaking the image. Now I get this sort of, that I can even sort of zoom in if I want to have like different slides. So I would first go to the central theme and then maybe even duplicate this slide. And then on the second slide, I might sort of give more sort of broader view of the visualization or the system. So we could then have this sort of transition from really closely in. But at a certain point, if you zoom in too much, then you will see the sort of pixels coming in and the anti-aliasing in the sort of letter form. So even if it's type orientated and hinted, there's always needs to be these gray pixels that are making these sort of tilted lines and these oval shapes that are made from these pixels. So this is over exaggerating because I'm zooming in so much that it's even kind of stupid. But if we just need to show the visualization, the PNG file format is really good. It's crisp. It doesn't get any sort of anti-aliasing. I'll show you here what's the troubles if we make it, and if I would export this image as a JPEG. The JPEG that is more made for this, let's name this a bad example. The JPEG image is made more on this sort of photos that has thousands and millions of colors. But here we can also adjust the quality of the images and even the resolution, but to show the problems more clearly even on this online environment, I'm now gonna use only the 72 dpi resolution, and we can also use a lower image quality. So I'll exaggerate now the sort of level. So because this is closely on the same that we saw on the PDF. So if I want to scale down the image so that it would be only this sort of medium, not even the PDF was this low, but even if we go for the medium level and 72 dpi, then once we import or insert the picture, our bad example, then the anti-aliasing and the sort of difficulties that we get is that the lines on the JPEG image, they get this sort of blurry, sort of almost like that it has some sort of water being mixed with the color, and especially with the sort of text elements that has this, that the color is changing really crispy from like sort of different colors. It get this almost like blurry effect around these elements and on these icons, because it's not compressing the colors as a one color, but it's trying to calculate these different sort of kind of, I really forgot the name about what would be a keskiarvo as a mean from the color. So it's something that would be close to the color and not the actual color. So even if we scale up the PNG image, here we get quite crisp colors even on these larger scales, because it's not trying to blur the lines between. Now we have almost same this scale on these two pages so we can a bit compare quickly on this effect. So on the PNG, the lines are quite crisp and the types hinted are looking crisp. But on the JPEG images, you get these blurry lines around them. But both formats work really well if you have enough sort of zoomed out. So this is more on this, like if you want to zoom in on the visualization in your presentation, then you run into these problems. If we scale them, let's use the designer. It's once in a world, it's quite even handy. So if we use this, there's no visible differences on the JPEG or the PNG image if we are scaling them on the screen to be like seen as a sort of from far away. It only comes into effect if we have to zoom in to a different part. But also just to show a really nice way of handling and losing these sort of troubles, that if you want to really scale in and have like a really nice presentation, we can also now export the file in a vector format. I'll take away the images and I'll take away before even that I show this, as we can then sort of don't mix up on the screen which one is which, so I don't have to change the colors. We can also export the Illustrator vector format as an SVG file, which is this standard vector graphic format. But this has been sort of in the development many years. So now finally it's starting to work on these programs. So if I'm using this SVG file format, then the vector graphics are then shared as vector. So we get to import the file not as a pixel-based image, and I'll name this as huge vector version. And now we'll use the same folder. There's no other SVG files, so it's looking empty. But if I export, it'll ask. You can even add these to a web page, so there's even a sort of code that is handling the styles. But I'll just use the default ones. And then in PowerPoint, once I insert, you can insert it as a picture, even though it's a sort of, you don't have to use any different tool. But here we get the vector version. It doesn't have a preview window, so it's showing sort of my browser icon on it. But if I insert the vector version, now this is then you can scale this almost unlimited resolution as the file is in this vector format. So it's gonna be crisp all over because it's drawing the file from the same sort of technique that the illustrator has used. So the SVGs are the best, but there's still some trouble sometimes with different sort of typefaces or maybe icons that you can run into. So it's better to have the both options of exporting as an image. Those images are then also easily shared even as a sort of newsletter or any sort of other environment. But as a sort of last really nice way of grabbing your audience's sort of attention, the vector format also gives this nice option of that you can then sort of zoom in here in PowerPoint for the visualization, and you can sort of walk your audience through it. So I'll make a quick example. So if this would be the sort of starting point, and then I'll duplicate the slide, and on the second slide that I have the same, I'll zoom in maybe to our central theme, and I'll zoom in so that we can see, and I can then explain and annotate about the customer group. Then I'll duplicate this slide again, and then I can just move, and we'll go for the view that I might show this stakeholder and this icon and explain about this one. Then let's make one last more. I'll duplicate the slide, and then I'll zoom out to a view that we might have, like the top half. I don't know, maybe a sort of full view again. So now we have sort of the title page, overview, a view that has the central theme focused, then the one stakeholder and one icon on focus on the screen, and then the overview again. So if I choose all of these 4 slides, and I put the transition, and I use this first version, this morph. So now it's gonna sort of animate through these slides. And now this is the sort of dangerous part in a Zoom recording. I'll switch to the slideshow, and let's see if we can see the slideshow, and hopefully this is also recorded. So then I have the sort of title page, and once I move to the graphics, I get the whole view. And then once my presentation proceeds and I want to move to the central theme, it'll zoom in nicely to the central theme, and I can annotate and explain about the, and then I can move the presentation to the second view, and it'll flow, and you can focus on the specific. And then once you return to the broader view, it'll zoom out, and you can set these sort of keyframes in this almost like an animation. And now I only hope that the recording and screen sharing also works so that you saw what was happening here. But if you only saw some sort of notes and slides from the PowerPoint, then I have to even revisit the video. But this is a nice way of using the vector graphics, that you can have these zooming in and not losing and not getting these pixels visible, and even using the same graphic format in the presentation software. So if you can get the element in a SVG format, then you can also use it more broadly on different softwares.